الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Brother Chairman, Brother Director, teaching staff and officers of the Restu Foundation, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Eschatology is that branch of knowledge which studies the end of history. The Christians have a very highly developed branch of knowledge called Christian eschatology, and so do the Jews. But we in Islamic civilization have so far restricted ourselves to the study of the subject as part of the study of hadith, the age of fitan. We are now making an effort to try to build this new branch of knowledge as Islamic eschatology, because I believe the time is now ripe for that. But it will be far easier for you to understand if I say ilmu akhiru zaman. Eschatology is a big word. Our topic today is that Islamic eschatology is the key to understanding the modern strategic, political, economic and monetary reality of the world. There are dots, D-O-T-S, dots in strategic affairs, like balance of military power in the world. There are dots in political affairs, in economic affairs, in monetary affairs. And we say that it is with eschatology that we can connect the dots. It's like the stars in the sky above. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح إلى آخر الآية. And we have surely adorned, made beautiful the sama ad-dunya with lamps. Why does he use the word lamp for a star? The stars twinkle, they give starlight, it's nice and pretty, but Allah speaks of them as lamps. And nothing happens in the Quran by accident. There must be a reason why He has described the stars in the sky as lamps. For the untrained eye, the one who simply goes to work in the morning facing morning traffic, and then come back home in the evening facing evening traffic, and then has biryani for dinner, and sits down and watches television until it's time for sleep. For him, they will always remain just stars which are twinkling, nothing more. It's pretty, that's all. They'll never become lamps. But for the astronomer, for the one who is sailing a ship in the ocean and wants to know in which direction he must travel, Allah has put the stars up in the sky for a purpose, that they might function as lamps. A lamp gives you light with which to see, so you can know in which direction to walk or to travel. But in order for the lamps, in order for the stars to function as lamps, you've got to learn how to connect the dots. How are the stars connected to each other? And that requires effort. It requires study. It requires dedication. It requires sacrifice. Something which is in short supply today, because so many other things are there to take up our time. But we are here today at Yayasan Restu with the hope that we might touch your hearts, and that you will now recognize the verses of the Quran to be like the stars in the sky. And that when once you learn to recognize each verse of the Quran as a lamp, and you learn to connect them together, then Islamic eschatology will explain to you what's happening in the world today in terms of strategic affairs. Why is Russia being targeted now? Is this something which has just started with Ukraine? Or have they been planning for Russia for a long, long time now? What's happening in the world of politics? Is it by accident that the world is moving in the direction of submitting to one world government? Is this the end of the ummah of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam? What a shame, what a disgrace that the ummah of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, the world of Islam, about which Allah says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. You are the best community raised for the sake of mankind, because you have a mission to stand up for what is right and just and virtuous, and to stand up against what is wrong and unjust and oppressive, and to do so based on faith in Allah. But now today, if you want to stand, you've got to get permission of the Security Council of the United Nations. If you want to stand up for, or you want to stand up against, it's Washington who has to approve. What a shame, what a disgrace for the ummah of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And when will someone stand up and say so? The economic reality of the world today is that all of mankind is being brought into one world market. And it's a market of thieves. The Quraysh chose to wage economic war on Islam. And for 3 years, they imposed an economic boycott. Quraysh imposed, you must have heard the term, economic sanctions against Muslims. No one will buy from you, no one will sell to you. Did Islam ever respond to use trade as a weapon? Did Islam ever wage economic warfare, ever? Is there anything in the Quran, anything in the Sunnah, even remotely resembling economic warfare? No. Islam gave to the world a free and a fair market. A market which does not recognize any special privileges for a Muslim over a non-Muslim. All are equal in the market. A market in which we are allowed to conduct trade even with the enemy. Islam has never prohibited us from conducting trade with the enemy. All that Islam has prohibited is when you are at war, you may not trade in weapons of war. Today, those who control the world economy gleefully, lustfully seek to impose economic sanctions as part of a strategy to bring down those who resist their rule. And the latest is now they're taking on Russia with economic sanctions. We say to you, compared to what Islam has offered to the world, you belong to the garbage bin. Ours is a world in which there is no economic warfare. Ours is a world in which we do not use trade and business to wage war. Ours is a world in which there is free trade, even with the enemy. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran has ordered us to conduct trade and business in such a way that there is mutual satisfaction. إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ تِجَارَةً عَنْ تَرَادٍ مِّنْكُمْ. This is what Islam has offered. And look at the rubbish that you are offering now with your latest threats to impose economic sanctions on Russia. Islam gave to the world money. Money which was real money. Money which had intrinsic value. The value of the money is inside the money. The money was created by Allah, not by George Soros. The value of the money can rise and fall based upon demand and supply in the market for gold and silver and so on. But these are natural forces, not artificial forces. Those who today control power in the world have taken the dinar and dirham out of the market, while our scholars of Islam, excuse my language, while our learned and distinguished scholars of Islam, our muftis, our maulanas, our sheikhs, our ustad, who are eating roti canai and drinking tetarik, they took the dinar and dirham out of the market. They have prohibited the use of dinar and dirham as money. They have made haram what Allah made halal. And anyone who knows even a little bit of the Quran would know that to make haram what Allah made halal, to prohibit what Allah has permitted, is an act of shirk. And please pronounce that word the way it is in the Quran. Don't change it in your Malay language. The word is shirk. One syllable, not two. Shirk. Why are we facing this reality today? Strategic, political, economic, monetary. From whence the banking system, which uses this new money. It used to be paper money once upon a time. It's not going to be paper for much longer. Paper is going. And beyond paper, it's going to be electronic money. You can't see, you can't touch. And those who have the intellectual acumen of donkeys would welcome. This is progress. It's a cashless world now. And so the banks can now lend an unlimited amount of money. There is no limit. The sky is the limit. Because you don't have to print the paper anymore. That's long time. You need a printing press, you need paper, you need ink, you need armored vehicles, you need security personnel to move it around. No more of that. Now you simply write a check for $7 trillion and send it to the Federal Reserve. That's all. And while these are eating their roti canai and drinking tea tarik, they're taking over the world. And when the bank has 1 ringgit, it can lend 10. They call it fractional reserve banking. But I call it, you're stealing it, you're thieves, legalized theft. What is it that explains this strategic, political, economic, monetary reality of the world today? It's not just political and economic and monetary. In the world of religion, can you imagine an Arab, the son of an Arab, the grandson of a Sheikh, and if you hand him a copy of the Quran, he can't read it. He can't read Arabic. Can you imagine it? Millions of Arabs today no longer perform salat. They have abandoned it. Can you imagine this? What's happening in the world? If those are the Arabs and the Quran is in Arabic, and mashallah, 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 Yaya San Restu Look at the work you are doing for the Quran. MashaAllah. What's happening in the world of religion? The religion is receding. وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَخْرُجُونَ مِن دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. People are leaving religion, not just Islam. In Britain, nobody goes to church anymore. So churches and monasteries which are hundreds of years old, and now they're being sold. Sometimes it's a KFC that buys a church. Sometimes it's a bingo hall that buys a church. And quite often it's Muslims who buy the church and convert it to a masjid. Maurice here is from Britain, who is sitting in front of me. He can tell you that religion is receding. And when religion recedes, then values become strange. There used to be such a thing as absolute values, universal values. That you must be honest in trade, honesty. But then comes secular values, and values become relative now. Well, if it is good for me, then I do it. And if it's not good for me, it's no longer good. And so, values are collapsing around the world. Is this happening by accident? Strange things are happening in the Holy Land, which are crying out for an explanation. And it seems to us as though the strategic reality of the world today is somehow related to the Holy Land. And so to the economic reality, so to the monetary reality and so on, connected to the Holy Land. And we say, it's eschatology that will connect the dots for you. I want to refer to a book entitled, it's in French, La guerre eschatologique by Hosein. Is that how you pronounce it? Any French-speaking speaker? No French-speaking? Hosein. And the name of the book is La guerre eschatologique, or the war, eschatological war. Recently published. I wrote to the publisher to order a copy. It's in French, so I've got to read slowly. My French is not that good. The publisher decided, no, we're going to send a copy to you free of charge as a gift. And the copy arrived at the mail. I wish I had it with me today. One friend of mine, I lent it to him to read. But he compares Christian eschatology and Jewish eschatology and Muslim eschatology in this book. And before we take up our subject, let me share with you some of his comments. He says that eschatology teaches us that these three religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, are incompatible with each other for the simple reason that their vision of the future diverge on this fundamental point, that at the end of time, one and only one must triumph. The others must be converted among Christians and among Muslims, or they must disappear altogether. Among Jews, in fact, there is not a will to convert others to Judaism. Entire Jewish activism and all the propaganda put by the Jewish intellectuals through their speeches, their films, their novels, etc., is to discredit the idea of religion, of race, of homeland, and any sense of belonging among others in order to raise the Jews above the mass of the Goyim. They think that when all nations have been destroyed, transformed into multicultural societies, when all religions have been obliterated, and when a world government has been established, probably after the Armageddon or the Great War or the Malhama, then an absolute and definitive peace will reign over the world. That's when the long-awaited Messiah will come. Jews who have kept their traditions will then be recognized by all of mankind as the chosen people of God Almighty. Hosein continues to speak now about Islam. He says, in Islam also there is the idea that the whole world must submit and must accept the message of the Prophet. However, as I said, this is to convert others, not to destroy them. Unlike Judaism, Islam is not a closed sect, but an open and a universalist religion, which is indeed like Christianity. It should, however, be borne in mind that we repeatedly find in the Quran the idea of fighting the infidels. Fighting the infidels, arms in your hand if necessary. As an infidel, it bothers me a little on the neck. This is his view of Islam. How do Muslim theologians envisage the end of this confrontation with the West and with Zionism? Here is what he has to say. The author of the book, La Guerre Eschatology. He mentions my name now. As a theologian, Imran Hosein has understood perfectly that the Christian West is now widely Judaized due to an incessant cosmopolitan propaganda in the media. Abortion, homosexuality, lesbianism, adultery are legalized today, he wrote. They have become Jewish. I never said that. He rightly said of the Europeans. I never said that. Imran Hosein also strongly condemns the Western maneuvers in view of the establishment of a world government. For him, in any case, things are very clear. God punished the Jews for the first time with a Babylonian army. He punished them for the second time with a Roman army. And the third time, which is to come, he'll be punishing them with a Muslim army. As for the Christians, who have not been able to preserve themselves from the Jewish nihilism, they should stop worshipping Jesus as if he was God, and they will be forced to recognize him as a prophet. These are my views. We note here, he says, that there's a difference between the tone of the Muslims who recognize Jesus as a prophet and the Jews who in their Talmud insult Christ and believe that he's the son of a prostitute and a Roman soldier. In Muslim eschatology, Jesus is also sometimes referred to as the Mahdi. In Muslim eschatology, Jesus is also sometimes referred to as the Mahdi, one who is guided by God, who will overcome the Antichrist in the end of time. Because there's also an Antichrist according to Muslims. They call him Dajjal. And as for the Christians, the Antichrist, they call him Dajjal. And as for the Christian, the Antichrist, who will persecute the faithful before being finally defeated, comes from a Jewish sect. Which is not at all surprising. The main difference is that Muslims believe that at the end of time there will be an earthly triumph, as the Jews also believe. But Christians, including Catholics, have abandoned any idea of victory on earth. The Catholic eschatology is confused, to be honest. It is not motivating. As among Jews or among Shiite Muslims who are working to bring their Messiah, in rare texts one may believe in an evangelism of all nations. This is the sixth period of the church, described by the Venerable Bartholomew Hauser, which precedes the great apostasy. In the next period, that of the Antichrist, we read that the only possible victory for Christians in those terrible days is to be defeated, persecuted, tormented, and put to death while remaining faithful, constant, and firm. This example is symptomatic. We see that Christians are disarmed morally, and that the heroes that they could be, and the heroes that could be, are transformed into martyrs. I have quoted extensively from R.A. Hosein because his is one of the most recent works and is widely read now in France, to show how our eschatology has not been presented, and there's such massive misunderstanding of our eschatology. So let us begin by correcting some of the misconceptions. Is it the agenda of Islam to rule the world? Is there anything in the Quran, is there anything in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, which gives Muslims an agenda of waging perpetual jihad until you establish the rule of Islam over all of mankind? I have not found any such nonsense. I have not found any such nonsense in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But you still have people with schoolboy methodology who will take one isolated verse and use that to build a theory. So let's leave the schoolboys. They're wasting our time. No, Islam does not have a mission to establish the rule of Islam over all of mankind. No. Well then, for what purpose do we wage war? Jihad in Islam, based on the Quran, which is the supreme authority, is that you wage war in response to aggression. But even when aggression is committed against you, you do not respond with warfare unless and until you have explored and exhausted all possible peaceful means of resolving the problem. That is the Islam which comes from the Quran and from Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is not a warlike religion. It is only when you have explored and exhausted all possible peaceful means for resolving the problem of aggression, only then do you have the right to wage war. And when we wage war, if the enemy inclines to peace, and you cannot incline to peace while holding on to the bloody fruits of your aggression. You cannot incline to peace while holding on to the bloody fruits of your aggression. If the enemy inclines to peace, which means giving up the bloody fruits of your aggression, then we must reciprocate and incline to peace. That is the Quran. Secondly, the Quran orders us. This is not permission to fight. No, this is not permission to fight. أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. This is now a command. وَمَا لَكُمْ. What's wrong with you? لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. That you do not stand up, rise up and fight in the way of Allah. For what purpose? That one was in response to aggression. This one is to liberate the oppressed. Islam, the religion, has zero tolerance for oppression. And the government of Ukraine, which was made on the streets of Ukraine, better listen carefully. Islam has zero tolerance for oppression. And if you use your armed forces against your own people, that's oppression. And Russia will have every right to respond. وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ ظَالِمِ أَهْلُهَا إِلَى آخِرِ الْآيَةِ. Not only must they be oppressed, but more than that, the oppressed must be crying out, asking for help to be liberated from oppression. And when they do that, then you have an obligation, Muslims, wherever you are in the world, to intervene and to liberate the oppressed. And so Islam, the religion, did not come to conquer the world. It never came to establish its rule over the world. But it most certainly came to liberate the world from oppression, provided that the oppressed are themselves crying out for liberation from oppression. So this is a misreading of the Islamic concept of warfare. But I can't blame the author of the book, nor can I blame European scholarship. Because Dajjal, in his cunning, created the Ottoman so-called Islamic Empire. And for 500 years, the Ottoman so-called Islamic Empire gave precisely this conception of jihad. That jihad is eternal warfare. Well, we can take a little rest in winter time, but when the spring and the summer comes, back to the battlefield every year. And so this is a state which was created for warfare. And the Ottoman Empire waged war for 500 years, again and again and again and again. And the world of Islam applauded. MashaAllah, look at these Ghazis, look at these great Mujahideen, waging war for the triumph of Islam, taking Islam all through Europe. How sad that our people were so brainwashed. Up to this day, scholarship, brainwashed. Guess whom the Ottomans waged war against? Did they wage war against Britain? Did they wage war against France? Did they wage war against Western Christianity? No. The Quran refers to Rome. Rome. There's a whole surah of the Quran known as Surah to Rome. And Allah speaks positively about Rome in Surah to Rome. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ألف لام ميم غلبت الروم بأدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون في بضع سنين لله الأمر من قبل ومن بعد ويومئذ يفرح المؤمنون. That Rome was defeated, but in a few years Rome will be victorious. And on that time when Rome is victorious, Muslims are going to celebrate. The Quran speaks of two victories. Min qabl wa min ba'd. Two victories. We know about the first victory. It was the Byzantine Orthodox Christian Empire, not the Vatican. This was based in Constantinople. This is Rome. And the Quran speaks positively about Rome. The Hadith cannot contradict the Quran. The Quran is the supreme authority in Islam. Why does the Turkish Prime Minister not understand that? What's wrong with Islamic scholarship in Turkey? That you do not understand that the Quran is the supreme authority in Islam. Not even history can contradict the Quran. And then the Quran speaks about a Christian people who in time to come would be closest of all to you Muslims in love and affection. وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى. Who are these Christian people who in time to come would be closest of all in love and affection to Muslims? And we're not talking about Muslims who have their Qibla in Washington. No. When Washington says stand up, they stand up. When Washington says sit down, they sit down. Sometimes Washington flies all the way and come into your own capital. We're talking about Muslims who remain faithful in their hearts to Allah and His Messenger, and who hold the mission of Islam that we do not tolerate oppression anywhere in the face of the earth. Who is the Rome? The way the Ottoman Empire waged war, jihad, eternal jihad, unjust jihad for 500 years against Rome. That was Dajjal's triumph. That was the triumph of Dajjal. This is a false notion of jihad. And yet, this is what Europe experienced from the Ottoman Empire. So I cannot blame the author of this book for holding this view of jihad. Islamic eschatology does not present a picture of the end time in which Islam is going to triumph over all and Islam is going to rule the world. Muslims meaning? No. It's not a Muslim army conquering everybody. No. If Islam is to rule, then in the end time a Muslim army must conquer all rivals. Then Islam will rule. But that's not Islamic eschatology. Islamic eschatology, on the other hand, speaks of an alliance in the end time between Muslims and Rome. And so it's a joint effort. That alliance between Muslims and Rome will be visible most of all after the Malhama. Because after the Malhama or the Armageddon, the next most important event which is to take place is the conquest of Constantinople. Notice, Nabi Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam referred to the city as Constantinople. And my limited understanding is that if the Prophet referred to it as Constantinople, then it is Sunnah. Am I wrong? It is Sunnah to refer to the city as Constantinople. And so Mustafa Kamal is out of place. Out of place. To try to prevent me from using the name Constantinople. If I were to go to Turkey today and use the name Constantinople, they'll arrest me. Because it's illegal. I find that fishy. I find that mysterious. I say, Mustafa Kamal, are you serving Dajjal or are you serving Allah? You seem to be a disciple of Dajjal. The conquest of Constantinople takes place after the Great War. And that conquest of Constantinople will witness the alliance of Muslims with Christians, Rome. And so we give an end time, a picture of end time, of an alliance rather than exclusive Muslim rule over the world. So much then for, it's not just only, an alliance with Eastern Christians, Orthodox Christians. But as you heard in the little 8-minute talk before, the Quran prohibits us from maintaining friendly ties and being allies of the Western alliance. That verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah, لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء, don't take such Jews and such Christians as your friends and allies. بعضهم أولياء, بعض who themselves are friends and allies of each other. That's the NATO, that's the Zionist Judeo-Christian alliance, which has NATO as its military arm. And we Muslims are prohibited from being friends and allies of such people. Of course, Turkey does not seem to understand this verse of the Quran. This then is a picture of what Islamic eschatology is presenting of the state of the world at the end time. We can now start to connect the dots, and we cannot do it for the total amount of subjects. We can't do it for monetary affairs and economic affairs and political affairs. We'll go for the rest of the day. But clearly, they want to rule the world. And one of the ways in which they achieve their objective of ruling the world is ruling the world of money. And in order to rule the world of money, they had to take real money out of the market and replace it with bogus money. If there's anyone who does not as yet understand that the paper money is bogus, it's fraudulent, it's utterly haram, we'd be happy to try to explain to you afterwards. But I think we've explained the subject sufficiently. It's time for us to be returning to dinar and dirham. Let me, in the remaining time, give you a taste of what it is like to use Islamic eschatology for understanding the strategic reality of the world today. Dajjal knows that in the end time there will be an alliance of Muslims with Rome. And so he has to plan strategy to ensure that this alliance will never take place. We are quite aware of the strategies which he's employed to enslave the world of Islam, and the consequence being the pathetic state of affairs we now have in the world of Islam. So there's no need for me to return to that subject. But let us look at the strategies pertaining to Rome, because that's at the center of attention at this time, Russia and Ukraine. We see the beginnings of the strategy with the creation of the Ottoman Empire, waging continuous warfare against Rome. Unjust war. Unprovoked war. No legitimate cause for war except this bogus theory of jihad, that Muslims have an obligation to wage eternal jihad against all the kuffar, all the infidels. This is Ottoman nonsense. And so as you wage jihad against the Christians, their hatred for you will grow and grow. The Ottomans did so many other things to ensure that that hatred rose to the highest level possible. They would enslave every Christian country they defeat. And then that country will have to offer tribute and fal. And the Ottomans disgracefully put into the treaty that part of the tribute that you have to pay to us is you will have to give us so many of your young boys. These are not 6 and 7 years of age. These are 10, 11, 12 years of age, Christian boys. And the Ottomans will choose those who are brightest and healthiest. And the conquered nation will have to offer their sons. The Ottomans will then sinfully and disgracefully force these boys to become Muslims. Some of them preferred death to become Muslim. And when they became Muslim, the Ottomans will then give them the finest possible training and education. So they became the elite fighting force of the Ottoman Empire, called the Janissaries. This is rubbing salt into a wound, that the Christian nations will now have to face an Ottoman army in which the elite fighting force will be their own sons. No wonder that they hate Islam with such an intensity today. The Ottomans took Christian women because the sultans never married. No, the sultan never married. No. Why? Because married women have rights. And the children of married women have rights. And they wanted to ensure succession so that the Ottoman Empire will continue to exist with no problems concerning succession. So Ottoman sultans had children only with slaves, or what the Quran refers to as malakat yad, Christian women. And so the sons of the sultans will have Christian mothers. So not only would the Ottoman army have as its elite fighting force their own sons, but the Sultan himself will be the son of a Christian woman. Sometimes a Russian woman. The son of one of our women is now the Sultan fighting war against us. This is adding salt to the wound. Where did they get the slaves from when they were not waging war and could not get enough? In Crimea, you had the Crimean Tatar Muslims. And the economy of Crimea was based on slave raiding. And the Crimean Tatars will go and raid Russia like a dragnet, just picking up people, innocent people. And then these will be sold to the Ottoman Empire. Shame, shame, shame on your so-called Islamic empire, Ottoman Islamic empire. Is that how you get slaves? These things are not forgotten. No. But the biggest one of all, the stab in the back, which is still bleeding to this day. And it was put in the name of Islam. Is that the greatest cathedral that Orthodox Christianity ever had was Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And it had functioned as a cathedral, the greatest cathedral of Orthodox Christianity for 1,000 years. And then when Sultan Muhammad Fatih conquered Constantinople, the first thing that he did, to the eternal shame and disgrace of this ummah, and I wish some scholar would stand up and challenge me so I can debate with him. When will that happen? Come and bring your bogus arguments, let's argue it. Let's debate it. He took that cathedral and converted it into a masjid in conflict with Allah's command in the Quran. In conflict with what the Prophet ﷺ had spoken and given in written assurances to Christians. Written assurance of Muhammad ﷺ. Using some bogus legal argument. And once we conquer a city, the city did not submit to us, did not seek peace, did not, surrender. We have the right to take over the city. No, Islam doesn't come from that bogus argument. Islam comes from the Quran, first of all, and then from the Prophet ﷺ. And so, for centuries, Dajjal was at work in destroying the possibility of an Islamic alliance with Rome. But you would not know that unless you start to connect the dots. And only Islamic eschatology can do that for you. Connecting the dots. And when the Ottoman Empire was to collapse, they didn't need it anymore. Now they want to take the Holy Land. So they're going to have to wage war against the Ottoman Empire. What did they do? They set a trap for Russia. Because Russia is now Rome. Russia had a monarchy, the Tsar of Russia. For hundreds of years, Russia had a monarchy. So they set a trap for Russia, Britain and France, because they knew that the Ottoman Empire was constantly waging war on Russia, Russia. So they said, the time has now come. The Ottoman Empire is the sick man of Europe. The war is coming, and we're inviting you to join us in an alliance. And Russia accepted the offer. And the Triple Alliance came into being, I think it was 1908 or 1909. What they did not reveal was a secret agreement between Britain and France and Russia that in the event of victory, Russia will get the city of Constantinople. They offered Constantinople through the front door, but through the back door they started to stab Russia in the back. Which is why we say thank Allah for Vladimir Putin today. Thank Allah for Vladimir Putin today, because now you've met your match. Now you've met your match. when the war was taking place and the Ottoman Empire was being defeated, and the Russian troops were an arm's length away from Constantinople, then the Zionists struck. October 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution. And the entire family of the Tsar were executed. And the new government taking over Moscow decided to take Russia out of the war. Why? You are about to win the war. You are just an arm's length away from Constantinople. This is the heart of Rome. All the Russian people love the city. Why do you take Russia out of the war at precisely that moment? The answer is because they do not want Russia to ever get Constantinople. That is why. They financed the Bolshevik Revolution. We now have the evidence. Wall Street financed it. The US government participated in supporting it, the Bolshevik Revolution. We know that now. So it was a Zionist revolution. And then when they stabbed Russia in the back that you could no longer get Constantinople, then came communism. Yes, of course, the communist ideology has a number of things in it that sound nice, like workers' rights. Yes. And people remember that with nostalgia now. How communism cherished the worker and gave to the worker his rights and so on. But communism was atheist. And it had a special vengeance for Rome, the Orthodox Christian Church. And so many Christian priests were killed. So many monasteries shut down. So many churches closed down. During the 60, 70, 80 years or whatever it was of communist rule over Russia. And not just Russia, over the rest of Eastern Europe. We don't have the time to take you into that history now. In 1954, the Soviet Union did something mighty strange. And unless you study Islamic eschatology, you will not understand these strategic affairs. The Soviet Union transferred part of Russian territory to Ukraine. Why? Why did Nikita Khrushchev transfer the peninsula of Crimea to Ukraine in 1954. Why? Answer: because it was part of the grand plan to stab Rome in the back, to ensure that Rome will not be able to challenge Israel. That's why. Russia, for 250 years after Russia had defeated the Ottoman Empire and taken Crimea away from the Ottoman Empire, Russia established its Black Sea Fleet, its navy, in Crimea. And for 250 years, this was the Russian navy in Crimea. And so, in transferring the territory of Crimea from Russia to Ukraine, without ever bothering to seek permission of the people of Crimea or the Russian people. No, just did it. The Soviet Union was playing a Zionist game. Yes. But you have to learn to connect the dots to see the picture. The grand plan was that they will eventually cause the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that when the Soviet Union collapsed, as it did because of these street revolutions and so on, that they could then pounce upon all the former territories of the Soviet Union to become members of NATO. And so the Zionist encirclement of Russia would be complete. And so said, so done. As soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, so many of these former Soviet territories now became members of NATO with a sword on Russia's neck. The plan is proceeding perfectly. All that they now needed was to get a government in Ukraine that will be pro-Western. Why? Number one, because Crimea is Ukraine's territory. And if you can get Crimea, if you can get Ukraine to become a NATO member state, then Ukraine can tell Russia, get out of Crimea. And instead of having a Russian navy in Crimea, you now have a NATO navy in Crimea. But that's not all. The Soviet Union skillfully used the eastern part of Ukraine to build the industrial heartland of the Soviet Union, the technological heartland for military industries. And Russia is dependent upon the factories of eastern Ukraine for the Russian military. If you can get a pro-Western government in Ukraine, and Ukraine can then become a NATO member state, the Russian military is going to suffer significant loss. And so when the Soviet Union was collapsed, it didn't collapse, it was collapsed. And then all of these member states of the Soviet Union became member states of NATO. The prize was now Ukraine. And the Zionists were moving and moving and moving until eventually, through street revolutions, they were successful. I think it was December or January. And the legally elected president of Ukraine had to flee the country. Then the Zionist mob took over Ukraine. Now, everything is set. All that now remains is for the government of Ukraine to be recognized by the West, which it did promptly, and then for Ukraine to apply for NATO membership. And as soon as Ukraine applies for NATO membership, the NATO then moves in and parks your nuclear weapons and so on, and then Russia will lose Crimea, and Ukraine will cut off all the military relationship they have with Russia. Because this is the technological industrial heartland in eastern Ukraine. But they plan their plans, and Allah plans His plans. And I want to come now to the last part of the lecture, which is going to surprise you. I have spent a long, long time with the study of Surah Al-Kahf of the Quran. There's a book outside of mine called Surah Al-Kahf in the Modern Age. It's part of my books on eschatology. There's Islam, an Islamic view of Gog and Magog in the modern world. There's Jerusalem in the Quran, but there's also Surah Al-Kahf in the Modern Age. In Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Zulqarnain. And 999 out of 1,000 scholars want to know, who is Zulqarnain? Was he so-and-so or so-and-so or so-and-so? And they cannot understand. Why is it that Imran Hosein has no interest in the subject? They can't understand. I have never attempted to identify Zulkarnain. I have no interest in the subject. But this man has written 3 books already on Surah Al-Kahf. And he's going to write the 4th book. Nobody else has done so much work in the modern age. How come he has no interest at all? He doesn't want to know who is Zulkarnain. Why? هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون? Here's the reason why I have no interest. Because when I look at the term Zulqarnain, I understand it not as someone with 2 horns, but I understand it as an event which impacts on 2 ages. One in the past, and a second one which is to come in Akhiru Zaman because of Gog and Magog. At this time, I'm the only person in the world of Islam giving this analysis. When that second event is to come, Qarnain means 2 qarn. 1 qarn that was in the past and 1 qarn which is to come. When that second event is to come, Qarnain, then he traveled in the direction of the setting of the sun until the sun set fi aynin hamiyah. And there is no difference in Islamic scholarship. The tafasir all recognize it to be the Black Sea. The Black Sea. So when the second is to come, the second event, watch the Black Sea. Crimea is in the Black Sea. If I am correct, and we are now living through the Qarnain, the second qarn, then what happened in Crimea was not by chance. They planned their plans and Allah planned His plan. And Russia was able to take Crimea with beauty and with speed that dazzled them. And the Zionist movement suffered its first major defeat from the day that the Zionist movement was created. First time when they lost Crimea. And if what is now happening in Ukraine is connected with Qarnain, then what is the world likely to see? Answer: that the Russians will eventually, after a sufficient time has passed, and after there is ample evidence of oppression and wickedness, the Russians are then going to intervene and give a demonstration of military force and power in which they will punish. فَأَمَّا مَنْ ظَلَمَ فَسَوْفَ نُعَذِّبُهُ ثُمَّ يُرَدُّ إِلَى رَبِّهِ فَيُعَذِّبُهُ عَذَابًا نُكْرًا. Zulkarnain says, I'll punish those who commit acts of oppression. And when they return to you, you will punish them as well. And so the world is about to witness. This is my opinion, and I can be wrong, and I ask you not to accept my opinion unless you are convinced that I am correct. This is my respect for you. That the world is now likely to witness a demonstration of the use of Russian military power in Ukraine, which will teach a lesson to those who have been stamping their oppressive feet upon the earth for so long. If Russia continues to use power successfully, you don't need a PhD to know that the West is then going to move towards the Armageddon or Malhama. They cannot take the loss of Crimea, so the writing is already on the wall that we're now moving towards the Malhama, or the Great War, prophesied by Nabi Muhammad. If you do not have Islamic eschatology, You'll go to work in the morning, face the morning traffic, come home in the evening, face the evening traffic, have your biryani for dinner, watch TV until you go to sleep. And you'll have absolutely no knowledge whatsoever that you are standing on the door of the Valhalla, or the Great War. That's where we are today with our scholars of Islam. It's sad for me to speak these words. Once the Malhama takes place, we don't have, as Muslims, any significant role to play in the Malhama. No, we don't have nuclear weapons. When those nuclear weapons explode, that's going to give us the dukhan, smoke. Most of mankind will die. Most of mankind will die. But they must be saying up there, most of mankind deserve to die. Israel is calculating that the rump which will be left behind will be easier for Israel to rule. And it will be very convenient for Israel if the two powers destroy each other. But no, Rome will not be destroyed. How do we know that? There will be no more aerial warfare. No aircraft will fly. No cruise missiles can fly. Nothing electronic will work after the Malhama. So wars will have to be fought on the land and on the sea. So how do we know that Russia or Rome will still remain in power after the Malhama? Answer: because Nabi Muhammad ﷺ said, after the Malhama is Fathul Constantinia. Why the conquest of Constantinople? It has only one military significance, only one. That unless and until you break the back of NATO in Constantinople and liberate Constantinople, the Russian Navy cannot pass through the Bosphorus to enter the Mediterranean Sea. The implication, therefore, of the conquest of Constantinople, which will be a Christian-Muslim alliance, is that Russia will still remain a military power after the Malhama. 2 years ago, I didn't have this knowledge. 2 years ago, I was saying Russia is Magog. We thank Allah who has helped me to get away from that mistake that I made. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may increase our knowledge. What happens after the Malhama is very interesting, but not part of our topic today. What I've done is I've connected the dots for you in one area, strategic affairs. You can do the same thing with political affairs. You can do the same thing with economic affairs. You can do the same thing with monetary affairs. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may grant that from our midst may emerge a new generation of scholars of Islam who will devote themselves to the study of ilmu akhiru zaman. Before I end, we are a small group of us engaged in building an institute, Mahad Ilmu Akhiru Zaman, here in Malaysia. I'm not going to tell you where. And we are humble, simple people. We're not building buildings with iron and steel, multi-million-dollar buildings. We're building punduks. And students can come from wherever they are using the Malay methodology, and you can stay in a punduk. You don't pay anything for accommodation. But we tell your mother to teach you to cook before you come. So you'll cook your own food. Over there is a punduk with Algerians. So they'll be cooking the Algerian food. And over there's a punduk of people from Bosnia. So they'll be cooking their Bosnian food. The Indonesian food will smell very nice from the Indonesian quarter. So they'll all cook their own food. We're building a masjid, surau, and classes will be in the surau. At the beginning, we accommodate about 50 students. but eventually we'll go to maximum 100. You don't need a few years to teach Ilmu Akhiru Zaman, no. We offer 3 courses. The first is an introductory course and anybody can attend. No requirements, anybody. It lasts for 1 week. So you live with us for 1 week. Based upon the results of the 1 week course, which will be repeated again and again and again and again, we'll then select those who can move forward to the 1 month course. Not everybody can go to the 1 month course. You have to show some knowledge and talent, where we'll deal with the subject in greater detail. And then we'll go to the last stage, which is the 3 months course. But for that only very few will qualify, very few. Because out of that 3, you have to be a graduate of Darul Uloom, for example. You have to be a graduate of Al-Azhar, for example, to come to the 3 months course. And at the end of that 3-month course, we hope that we'll be able to produce scholars who tomorrow will be able to guide the world of Islam. If any of you are interested in helping us in building the punduks, just here's Jamal over here. You can inform Jamal. Stand up, Jamal. Yeah. You can just go to Jamal and let him know, and he'll give you the contact. We'll let you know how much a punduk costs to build, all right? And if you cannot afford to build the whole, when you build a punduk, it becomes waqf. Notice I said waqf, 1 syllable. That's the correct pronunciation, okay? When you build a punduk, it becomes waqf. However, you can come and stay in the punduk off and on. Don't come and live permanently there. This is not a Muslim village. But you can come, spend a week or so, off and on in your punduk. And you can help to maintain the punduk, all right? And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may bless our effort with success. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين.